At what point will history stop repeating itself? For many years, Black people in America have had to fight for equitable education, from the Reconstructive era and even now. Let's view the story of Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown. Do you know about her? Did you learn about her in history class? No? Well, that's okay, because I didn't either. I'm Crystal Iman Pratt, and you're now listening to Legacy and Lessons, where we will take a deep dive into studying historical and contemporary leaders and events in education, civil rights, and academia. Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown is somebody I never heard of until my family took a trip to a historic site in Sedalia, North Carolina, called the Palmer Memorial Institute. It was once the home of more than 1,000 African American students from 1902 and 1970, a finishing school founded by Dr. Brown on more than 300 acres of land. Let's pause and take a step back to look at who Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown was. She was a Black woman, a descendant of enslaved people, born in 1883 in Henderson, North Carolina. When she was a small child, her family relocated to Massachusetts to escape the Jim Crow South. It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, while still in high school, on a chance encounter while babysitting, pushing a baby carriage down the street and carrying a copy of the book Virgil, that she met Alice Freeman Palmer, the second president of Wellesley College, a private women's liberal arts college. Palmer took interest in the sight of a young Black girl with a baby stroller in one hand and a book in the other. Palmer was fascinated with Brown and went on to become her mentor. Brown showed promise. She was smart. She was a gifted student. Keep in mind that at this time, many of the Black people back home in North Carolina were only getting up to an elementary school education. But luckily, Brown was in Cambridge and in the company of Palmer. So impressed by Brown, Alice Freeman Palmer sponsored Brown's schooling. She insisted on taking on these expenses so that Brown was able to advance her education. Palmer also introduced Brown to prominent people in Boston. So she was networking. You'll find out why this is important a bit later on. Brown went to study at Salem Normal School to become a teacher. It was in 1901, at 18 years old, when she had a conversation with the field secretary of the Women's Division of the American Missionary Association, which led her to return to rural North Carolina. The American Missionary Association, or the AMA, wanted her to teach poor Southern Black students. Brown accepted the job, making $25 a month. She found herself in McLeansville, now known as Sedalia, not far from Greensboro, North Carolina. She started by teaching in a one-room school at a church with at least 50 students. It was here, in this unlikely place, that Brown planted a seed. Black children were learning, and she was determined to keep moving forward with the mission. But sadly, in spring 1902, the AMA stopped their funding. However, the students and parents, the community that Brown impacted, encouraged her to keep going. So she secured money by turning to her network in Massachusetts. And in October 1902, the school moved to guess where? Across the street, to a blacksmith shed. She named the school Palmer Memorial Institute in honor of her mentor, Alice Freeman Palmer, who had died the same year. With the organizing Brown did, with both Black and white leaders in Massachusetts and also in North Carolina, Brown was able to build a campus on more than 300 acres of land. In the beginning, the Palmer Memorial Institute focused heavily on both academic and industrial training, which the Northern white donors loved. And to top that, Brown was a strict disciplinarian. The curriculum included etiquette and religion. By 1915, Boston philanthropists Carrie and Galen Stone, Harvard University's president Charles William Eliot, and educational leader Booker T. Washington supported the school. Okay, so let's chat a bit more about Booker T. Although Brown did not 100% embrace Booker T. Washington's philosophy, she did incorporate some of it. He believed that blacks only needed vocational education, that it was more valuable than higher education. So of course she did not agree totally with that. But she did think that black students should be able to work with their hands. So as you may know, agriculture is big in North Carolina. The Palmer Memorial Institute ran a farm. Interestingly enough, when families were unable to pay the tuition for their child, the child was able to work their way through by being on the farm. So although Brown had her students going through this sort of training, she also implemented a liberal arts education because she was influenced by W.E.B. Du Bois. Brown was able to adopt opposing educational philosophies into the Palmer Institute, dubbing it the Triangle of Achievement. As noted by the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum in the History 101 series, she aimed to help students become educationally efficient, culturally secure, and religiously sincere. Simply stated, Brown wanted her students to have the best academic education available to uplift the African American community. So imagine this. The school went from a shed to 2 buildings to even more expansion because Brown was able to garner hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the school. All of this for black students in the segregated South. In 1922, the school was fully accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools, making it the only accredited rural high school in Guilford County, black or white. By the late 1920s and early 30s, the school shifted from its emphasis on industrial education and discontinued elementary education and focused on college prep. This was after Brown and others had convinced Guilford County to open its first public rural school for black students. And by the end of the 1940s, under Brown's leadership, the Palmer Memorial Institute was a premier boarding school with 14 buildings to educate black middle-class students. Palmer was the only finishing school of its kind in America. Again, on more than 300 acres of land. Black students were coming in from everywhere, even as far as Bermuda and Kenya. The Palmer Memorial Institute was world-renowned, international. The wealthiest families were sending their children there. Notably, over 90% of Palmer's graduating students pursued higher education, with 64% earning postgraduate degrees. To update you on what Brown accomplished personally during the years that Palmer Memorial Institute was climbing the ladder of success, Brown studied at Wellesley during the 1927-1928 school year, and she also lectured there, as well as at other noteworthy institutions, such as Howard University, Hampton University, and Tuskegee Institute. Additionally, in 1909, Brown was one of the organizers and founders of the North Carolina State Federation of Negro Women's Clubs, developed for the betterment of Negro womanhood. In 1915, Brown became North Carolina Federation's second president, and she held that role for 21 years, the longest tenure of any of the presidents to date. Brown, also justifiably so, received 6 honorary degrees, including an honorary doctorate from Lincoln University, Wilberforce University, and Howard University. She also published a book in 1940 called The Correct Thing to Do, to Say, to Wear, and appeared on national radio, commencing her as the First Lady of Social Graces. The publicity also leveraged the Palmer Institute the opportunities to be featured in Ebony magazine, with the school still monumentally racking in hundreds of thousands of dollars in endowment money. After 50 years, Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown retired in 1952. She handpicked her successor and later died in 1961 of heart failure and was buried on the great campus she developed. The Palmer Memorial Institute went on to face a myriad of challenges and was eventually forced to close in 1971 due to a fire that destroyed their administration building and a classroom building. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, why are we diving into the story of Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown and the Palmer Memorial Institute? Like, why is any of this important? How does it relate to the broader conversation about equitable education and its significance in today's society? Well, the story of Dr. Brown and the Palmer Memorial Institute serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring struggle for equitable education, particularly for marginalized communities. Dr. Brown's journey embodies resilience, determination, and a relentless pursuit of educational opportunities for African American students in the face of systemic discrimination and inequality. Through her visionary leadership, Dr. Brown not only established a school, but created a nurturing environment where Black students could thrive academically, culturally, and socially. Her commitment to providing a holistic education, combining academic rigor with practical skills and character development, laid the foundation for generations of African American students to succeed and excel in a society that often denied them access to quality education. Also, the Palmer Memorial Institute story shows us the importance of representation and empowerment in education. By fostering an inclusive learning environment and celebrating Black culture, history, and achievement, Dr. Brown challenged the prevailing norms of segregation and uplifted her students to recognize their worth and potential. In today's world, where disparities in education persist, systemic racism continues to impact communities of color. The lessons from Dr. Brown's story remain as relevant as ever. It reminds us of the ongoing struggle for educational equity and the transformative power of education to uplift individuals, families, and an entire community. As we wrap up our exploration of Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown and the Palmer Memorial Institute, let's reflect on the lessons we can learn and consider how we can work toward a more just and equitable education system for all. Thank you for joining me on this journey.
You've been listening to Legacy and Lessons.